to meet you. My name is Ruth and I'm a senior tutor here at the University of Law. I have worked in charities, I worked in a legal charity on sort of women's rights, and I'm also the chair of a charity. So it was really interesting looking at your website, and definitely think that the charity I'm involved in and lots of other charities I'm aware of could really benefit from what you do and hearing more about the work that you do. So I just wanted to start to ask you a bit of background about what led you to where you are today.
Hi, hello. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. So my name is Zoe Amar. I run a social enterprise called Zoe Amar Digital, and what we focus on is helping charities and other non-profits use digital more effectively to achieve their charitable purpose. So how they can use digital in developing the right strategies to reach more people, design better services, grow their income and their influence, and generally be more efficient and even better at what they do.
Excellent. And so what is it that you do, or did you start this organisation yourself?
Yes, I did indeed. So I actually wear a number of different hats in the sector. So Zoe Amar Digital is my day job, and I've got a team of 22 amazing people working with me there. But then I also do a number of different things in the sector, which probably is quite confusing when you're looking on our website, because alongside my day job, I also am a co-author of a report which comes out every year called the Charity Digital Skills Report, which is an annual barometer of digital adoption, skills, attitudes, funding and support needs right across the charity sector. And I also am the founder and the chair of the Charity Digital Code of Practice, which essentially is a best practice framework, a bit like the Charity Governance Code, so that charities can understand how they're performing in relation to best practice in the charity sector and plan how they can improve.
Wonderful. And so what inspired you, or how did you get to the point you are now, sort of in your career?
So I'll take you back a bit to my legal days, just briefly. So very proud to be a graduate of the University of Law. But just to sort of take you back to those days, so I did my PGDL and LPC, as I think they were then known. They're probably called different things now at the College of Law. Then I went and worked for Clifford Chancery as a paralegal, and then I started my training contract working for a firm called Hunters in Lincoln's Inn, where I was for a few years and qualified into property. And then I went off to another firm. But I'd always done a lot of charity volunteering work on the side. So right from when I started as a paralegal, I was doing a lot of pro bono advice work at Toynbee Hall. If any of your listeners have not come across Toynbee Hall, it's an amazing charity based in the East End of London.
It's an absolutely amazing charity.
So amazing. I love them.
Worked there, yeah.
They are fantastic, and I learned so much from volunteering there, and I developed loads of skills that I use even today, even when I'm no longer a lawyer. So I really enjoyed being a lawyer. I loved working with clients. I was always in the kind of marketing department as well, so sticking my nose around the door of there going, wouldn't it be great if we did this for business development, and how can we do this and get to know these clients better? So I was probably very annoying looking back on it. But I guess that was an early indication that despite enjoying what I did in the world of law, I had, started to get curious about what was outside it. And then I just got to a point where I realised that the world of charity was just something I really wanted to explore more. And I was coming up to 30 by that point, and I thought, if I don't explore this now, I will probably never do it, because in a few years' time, I just met my husband by that point. I thought we'll probably have children and a house, and I may not be able to look into this again. So I did something which probably seems a bit crazy. I decided to quit my job. I put myself through some career coaching, and the thing that came up again and again was my interest in charity and a nascent interest in digital. And what happened was then I thought, right, how can I explore this? So I got paired through an amazing scheme called Reach Volunteering, which I would highly recommend to anyone out there interested in doing volunteering and making the most of their legal skills. And they paired me with a charity which was then known as LASA, which did a lot of legal advice and had some digital products and services through which they did that. And they were also advising charities and government bodies about technology.
So what was that called, Larsa?
Yeah, it was called LARS. It's called RightsNet now. They've had some
Okay,
changes to their funding, so they're a bit smaller.
okay.
But yeah, they were doing great work at that point. And I was really lucky. Reach Volunteering paired me with them. So I went in and I was doing effectively like pro bono work, making the most of some of the things that I'd done as lawyer, but also some of the marketing skills that I developed. And I'd only been there a few weeks when they said, well, we want to create a new role for you. We're looking for a head of marketing. And that was me for the next 5 years, which is very exciting. And then, of course, time passes very quickly. I learned a lot during those 5 years. I discovered that digital was my real passion. And what happened was after I had my second child, who is now 10, just after I decided I wanted to do something a bit more flexible. So I thought, right, I'm going to strike out on my own and set up my own business advising charities about digital strategy. I'll probably only do it for a couple of years, till the kids are a bit older. But I discovered I really enjoyed it, and also that I was hopefully quite good at it, and we had lots of work coming through the door, and then I started to grow my team. So yes, that's the way it worked out. And really the core of the business, the vision we're trying to deliver on, is that we want all charity leaders to have the confidence and the skills to make better strategic decisions about digital. And that's so that they can lead change successfully, but also so that they can increase their organisation's impact and help the sector as a whole be more innovative, agile and resilient.
And I think it's definitely something that a lot of charities really need, what you're offering, because it's something that is it's a huge gap. And just looking at your website, I was just fascinated, because I think charities do what they do well, and often digital is definitely not something they do well. So the other thing, from what you've been saying, I think it's really important, if we've got students listening, like how important all that voluntary work you did was, and also that, your career is open to change, and that's really fascinating. You took that risk and it paid off. And then you've made it work with having your children, and I think that's really, really inspiring for maybe some of our women listeners as well. What do you think makes your agency different to others? And are there competitors that do similar things to you?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's lots of digital agencies out there in and outside the charity sector. And of course, there's other agencies. And also there's some of the big consultancies do strategy work as well. I guess what makes us different is the insight that we have into where the sector's at with digital and what needs to change. We've got a real bird's eye view of that through the Charity Digital Skills Report, which has been going for 6 years and effectively is tracking the digital adoption of the charity sector, but also where the funding and support needs are. And then also through having worked with the Charity Commission and government and NCVO and other charities and infrastructure bodies on the Charity Digital Code of Practice, which, as I mentioned, is a kind of governance framework for best practice in charities with digital, and in particular what trustees and also leaders need to be considering about where their organisation may need to improve how it uses digital, but also where it is right now, and doing a bit of benchmarking on that. So I think that the work our organisation does, I mean, at the end of the day, we're a small social enterprise, but I feel that we really punch above our weight in doing some work which our clients have said to us they think is pioneering, they think it's agenda setting, which is really lovely to hear. Certainly, the report that we run that's been involved in the past in setting government policy, which is, really exciting. We get lots of nice feedback from charities about it as well. But yeah, I mean, I think what makes us different is the fact that we have that privilege through the insights that we have of really understanding the challenges facing charities and what's needed to close the gap.
Can you explain what a social enterprise is and how that differs from a limited company or a charity, or is it all of those?
Yeah, of course. No, it's a great question because there's a bit of a grey area, I think, around how a social enterprise is kind of incorporated. And the answer is you can be a limited company. So the idea of a social enterprise is really that you're a business which has a really strong sense of social purpose, and that you're investing, some of the profits back into essentially social good. So I'd say it's different from a charity in that if you're a charity, you're always probably going to have some dependency on external funding, whereas certainly all the social enterprises that I know, and we take this view as well, is that you're effectively having to generate a lot of your own income yourselves, and you've got a sense of what's the change that we're working towards, which kind of social change, which balances out the for profit motive. So in our case, we do a huge amount of pro bono work across the sector, but also all of our products and services are really designed for helping the sector move forward with digital as a whole collectively, and to collaborate in doing that, rather than we're just going to go in and do project by project in a way that generates income for us. And of course, there's nothing wrong with making money, right, and operating in that way if you're delivering a successful result for the client. I'm good on organisations who do that. I guess the thing that's always got me excited is how can we make sure that the work we're doing is driving more broad social change across the sector, and that's where a lot of the insights feed into the thought leadership work that we do in the pro bono work, so that we can make sure that we're bringing charities together to really move forward on their digital journeys.
That's really interesting. What do you think, and are there any new digital opportunities on the horizon for charities that we should be aware of or that you're foreseeing?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of opportunities around AI, for example. So I think that is going to be a real area of growth for charities over the next, it's starting now, really. So I think the first thing is we all know that the Copilot tool is getting incorporated into Office 365. I'm sure lots of law firms are looking at that. And equally, if your firm uses Google for Business, then there's a very similar tool called Bard, which is already there actually in the suite of tools, but it hasn't quite been properly switched on and integrated for most people quite yet. So we're all going to see massive change in our working lives over the next 6 to 12 months, and that will be very true for charity. So that's the first opportunity. How can we be more efficient and collaborative and productive by using these new tools? And then, of course, there's opportunities around, well, how might we use these tools for things like service delivery? So there's organisations who are already using chatbots, and that's been going on for some years. Like Shelter's had a chatbot, the homeless charity has had a chatbot for years, and you've probably seen some of the mental health chatbots that are out there. But clearly there's opportunities to use those sorts of technologies and others in the way in which charities offer, say, information and advice. So it might be that, coming back to Toynbee Hall, where they have that legal advice clinic, it might be that if you go in and, there might be different ways in which that clinic needs to evolve in the future. It might be that people start to interact with it more online through a ChatGPT type tool, or it might be that the services that you get when you go in are slightly different because you're getting an initial triage through some sort of AI tool, which then funnels you through to the lawyer who's got the area of specialism that you need. So I think there's lots of opportunities in service delivery and efficiency, also using AI tools to create your fundraising and your marketing content. This is probably going to make all the lawyers listening really terrified, but I have come across a charity CEO who was using ChatGPT to help edit their board papers, which, provided you do it in the right way with the right parameters and lots of time for editing and checking, I think that could be a really interesting thing to explore. These tools are yes and, rather
Yeah.
than taking things away from charity stuff. I don't think we're necessarily going to see a huge reduction in the workforce. I think it's very much about how might we make sure that these tools become part of our roles in the charity sector and also outside the sector, and how could it make us more productive and do more and achieve more.
I mean, it does feel like it's a different day it is a different day every day, but a different sort of day to celebrate something. But do you think International Day or Charity Day is important?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a great point because ahead of this interview, I was sort of thinking about how we talk about charity day to day in wider society outside of the charity sector. And certainly there's been research conducted in the sector which shows that lots of people know what a charity is, right? I mean, many of us will have donated or volunteered, or we may even know people who work for charities, or we're chairs of charities, like you were saying. But not everyone necessarily knows the entirety of the work that charities do. And there was a really interesting bit of research conducted a while ago in 2014 by the Charity Commission, which showed that 40% of the public say that they or their close family or friends have benefited from or used the services of a charity. So, for example, if you know someone who's been diagnosed with cancer and they call up Macmillan to get some advice about what they do next, well, Macmillan are obviously a charity. And there's so many things that charities are doing day to day in local communities, whether it's running, sort of community groups like art groups, right through to really big charities like the Scouts or Sense, where they're doing huge programs across the country, working with hundreds of thousands of people to support young people or people with a specific health condition, or to influence policy change or whatever it might be. So if you look at the totality of what the sector achieves, that may be something that's only truly understand within the charity sector. And I think we all need to do a better job within the sector of communicating that. And I think there are ways in which infrastructure bodies like NCBO and Akibo doing some great work in that area. It's quite a complex thing to communicate, though, that breadth of work that the charity sector does. And that was one of my big learnings when I transferred over from the world of corporate law to being in a charity. You sort of realise how much work is going on day to day in the charity sector and how a lot of it is actually quite complex.
You're so right. There's so many charities doing things that we couldn't really survive as a society without, and they do it without a lot of recognition. What are restrictions for charities? I can think of a few coming up against in the digital world, and how do you overcome these?
Well, there's two main ones that I see day to day in my work. The first thing is resources are at a real premium in the sector. So a lot of charities are very dependent on either donations coming from, family, friends, everyone who's volunteering and who's donating to them, and people are fundraising for them, perhaps by running marathons or bake sales, things like that. Or they might be very dependent on government funding. So the charity I used to work for was very dependent on government funding. So the restrictions there obviously very much about funds being at a real premium. And then the second thing is skills as well. So we find in the Charity Digital Skills Report year on year is that certainly the appetite is there to improve how charities use digital and to make the most of it as an opportunity. But if you are a charity who's trying to hire, say, a really amazing web developer, and then that web developer gets an offer from, say, Facebook for a lot more money to go and work there, it's really hard for charities to compete in that way with the salaries that the private sector is offering. And we do have a systemic issue in the UK around people with really good digital skills. We just don't have enough of them to go around any of our sectors, really. So I think there's a challenge there for the sector about how it recruits, how it makes the most of the advantages challenges it has as an employer, and also how it can do the best that it can with the limited funds that it has. But I'm pleased to say that what's really great about charities, and one of the reasons why I love working in the sector, is people are often very, very innovative. They are really, really keen to get themselves stuck into solving problems, to doing everything they can, even with a limited amount of money. So it's actually a very resilient sector, really, really resilient, even though the resources can be a bit precarious year on year. It's a sector where there are highly committed people.
What's been your highlight of working with charities? Is there something that stands out for you?
Oh, there's so many, so many. I mean, I'm lucky to have one of those jobs where really exciting, interesting things happen every day. I think one of the nicest things that has ever happened to me is I was working with the CEO of a really small charity. They only had about 3 people. And he said to me, Zoe, you've taught me that digital change is manageable and you don't have to have all the answers. And that was great. As soon as I heard that, I thought, my job is done. That's great. He really gets why this stuff matters, but also that he's confident enough to lead this change, because quite often that's what I'm trying to do with my job, instill that confidence in leaders around the clarity of the goals that they have, but also that they are the right people to lead the massive change that the charity needs to go through. So that was it sounds like a small thing, but it was just a lovely moment where you feel like you've done a decent job to get someone to that point. And that charity's gone on to do brilliant things in digital. And then one for all the legal geeks listening, which I think they might like, with the Charity Digital Skills Report. We were really lucky. We got mentioned in the House of Lords just a few years ago when they were having a debate about charity. So it was nice to see the report get a mention in Hansard. I did tell my family, but they were singularly unimpressed. But I know the legal world, people listening out there will get why I was
finally found your audience for this, because I am really excited to hear that and very jealous that you've been in Hansard. The current focus of International Charity Day is global solidarity to eradicate poverty. What role do you think charity has in alleviating poverty?
Yeah, it's a great question, because when we talked about discussing this, it took me right back to sitting in the lecture theatre back in the day when I was at College of Law. And I remember learning about the 4 heads of charity, the relief of poverty, the advancement of education, of religion and other purposes beneficial to the community. And what I didn't quite realise at the time was that those 4 heads of charity were developed in the 19th century, weren't they? And then there's that kind of 19th century notion of charity embedded in relief of poverty. I am a wealthy person and I must go and do good for the community. And I'm not saying that there's anything inherently wrong with that model, but what I'm saying in particular, relevant to your question, is that I think the way that charities work towards relief of poverty now is very different because society is so different. So it's more about working alongside people rather than, I think, dispensing goodwill and that sort of thing. So just some recent stats which I think are really relevant to the changing role of charity in this times and how they're really plugging this essential gap when there are so many difficult things going on, especially during cost of living. So the Trussell Trust, who many people will know, responsible for lots of food banks across the UK. So close to 3 million emergency food parcels were distributed by food banks in the Trussell Trust network in the past 12 months. And that's the most parcels ever distributed by the network in a year. Shocking. It says so much about the times that we live in, that charities having to plug that gap. Trussell Trust, absolutely brilliant charity. If anyone out there is thinking I'm going to donate to a charity, so please do take a look at them. Amazing organisation doing much needed work. And then another way in which charities work towards the relief of poverty is, you might have heard there was a story from Citizens Advice. So thousands more people are going to start the winter behind on their energy bills because of everything that's going on with cost of living. They're going to have to start borrowing to pay them. So Citizens Advice is obviously running all these advice bureaus, which some of your listeners may even volunteer at, across the UK. And there's been a 17% increase on the same period last year of people with energy debts contacting Citizen Advice for advice in the first 6 months of this year. So a really significant increase there. So it's 46,431 people needing advice. So we all know someone who's affected by that, right? There may even be people listening who are affected. So I think this shows the vital work that charities are doing in that area in an exceptionally tough year.
Absolutely, and they're also battling their own problems in terms of the energy crisis and things like that. But it is that's really, I mean, as you say, it's a sign of the times, but it's wonderful, you know, to hear of that amazing work that's being done and how essential it is in alleviating poverty. Who is your inspiration?
To be honest, I'm just very, very inspired by all the charities that I'm fortunate enough to be working with day to day, because there's so many people doing such inspiring and interesting work across the sector. It's a sector where you don't have to look very hard for great stories, great people, role models who are really committed to change across the sector. I mean, I guess if I had to pick one person, I'm a huge fan of Polly Neat, who's the CEO of Shelter. I think she has tirelessly fought for change in the, you know, really quite shocking levels of housing provision that we have in the UK. And I know Polly, and she's not a woman who gives up easily, and good on her. She's really, really focused and delivering on her strategy. And that's what we need right now in this country. We need people who are committed to change, who are going to be fighting for change in all the difficult times we have right now and ahead.
I think for younger women to see role models like her and like yourself, are there any tips you would give to students who maybe wanted to follow in your footsteps?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think if I could go back and talk to 24-year-old Zoe when she was joining College of Law, I would have told her to worry less. And I think that I remember when I was starting out my legal career, and I think when you're in your 20s and even your 30s, so is this going to work out? Am I making the right steps? And am I working in the right places? And particularly, you know, if you want to become a parent, how on earth am I going to juggle work and an interesting, fulfilling career that helps me pay the mortgage? And what I wish I had, looking back on it, is just a bit more self-confidence that it was all going to work out okay, because it has worked out well. So that's what I would say to anyone listening. Just have confidence that you know what you're doing, you are going to get there. And most importantly, if you need to change course, change direction, then that's okay. There's loads of really interesting research coming out of the world of digital at the moment about how transferable skills are really, really important. And what I wish I had appreciated even more about being a lawyer is that you get a huge amount of transferable skills. So whether it's that ability to work with, you know, a challenging client, or whether it's about running a big project under stressful conditions, or whether it's about being commercially aware or knowing your way around a contract. I draft all of the contracts that we have with clients, for example. You know, there's lots and lots of skills that you can take from one profession into another. And if you decide further down the line, actually, I don't want to be a lawyer, or want to do a different type of law. You know, I interviewed someone for your podcast, Alex, who had gone from being in-house as lawyer to working for a charity themselves. All of those things are possible. Just believe that there are lots of possibilities ahead for you, and you can change direction. And if you are hardworking and you're committed and you're creative, you can make a lot of really good things happen.
Well, that's really, really lovely to hear. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Zoe?
Well, there's just one extra piece of advice. I think the most important thing that, again, I wish I had realised earlier in my legal career is think about what you're enjoying about the role you're in, even if the role isn't quite right for you, or even if it is and you're enjoying it and you're loving what you're doing and where you're working. Notice and pay attention to the things that get you really excited in your job. So when I was a lawyer, and I was a property lawyer, and it wasn't always the most exciting line of type of law to work in, perhaps, although there were some interesting things about it. I was one of those lawyers that loved working with clients. I got excited when the phone rang because I love talking to people. I love holding people's hands through difficult situations, and that's come in very useful for my job now. So that's what I would suggest to anyone who's listening who is early career or mid-career. Just start making a note and paying attention to those things that you really enjoy in your working day, even if they seem quite small, because that is the key to what you want to do in the future.
Absolutely. And it's good to know that you can be a successful lawyer and still want to do something else, and that you can do that. And I think what your journey shows is that, amongst all the other things and amazing work that you've done with your social enterprise. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. And for all the listeners out there, do have a look at our website, zoeamar.com. If anyone's got questions about working in the charity sector, please feel free to drop me a line. You can find me on LinkedIn at Zoe Amar. And my email is zoe@zoeamar.com if you want to contact me that way. And also, I just want to really encourage all of your amazing listeners to get out there, volunteer, donate, support charities. The sector's doing really amazing work, and it's also really fun to go and volunteer or donate to a charity as well. So do get involved in whatever the sector's doing.
Thank you, Zoe.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.